There is no silence in the world as loud as the one your own children create. It's a void where their laughter used to be, a chilling emptiness that echoes in every room of your house. I learned the true meaning of that silence on my daughter's 10th birthday. The party was at my ex-wife's house. I stood on the perfectly manicured lawn, a forgotten ghost at the edge of the celebration. Balloons bobbed in the breeze, children shrieked with joy, and my little girl, Sophie, was the radiant center of it all. I held a carefully wrapped present, a vintage astronaut helmet she'd been begging for months. We'd always stargaze together, it was our thing. I'm David, 39 years old. For the past 3 years, since the divorce, I've been fighting a cold war for the hearts of my 2 children, Sophie and her older brother, Jake. Their mother, Vanessa, had moved on with a vengeance, and part of that vengeance seemed to be systematically erasing me from their lives. I saw Sophie spot me. My heart leapt. But the smile on her face didn't reach her eyes. She walked over, not with a run, but with a slow, deliberate pace that felt all wrong for a 10-year-old on her birthday. "Hi, Dad," she said, her voice flat. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," I said, my voice thick with emotion. I held out the present. "I got you the helmet. Maybe we can try it out tonight if the clouds clear?" She took the box but didn't open it. She just held it, her small fingers tracing the ribbon. Then she looked up at me, and her words were like a shard of ice to my heart. "Mom says you only buy me expensive things to make her look bad. She says it's manipulation." She paused, reciting words that were too big, too clinical for her. "She says you don't really love us. You just love the idea of us." The world tilted. I could see Vanessa watching us from the patio, a glass of champagne in her hand, a small, satisfied smile playing on her lips. She had orchestrated this. She had poisoned this moment, this gift, this connection. Before I could form a response, my son, Jake, 13 and already building a fortress of teenage angst around himself, walked up. He put a protective arm around Sophie's shoulders. "She doesn't want it, Dad," Jake said, his voice a low grumble of contempt. "Why do you always have to cause drama? Just leave us alone. This is our family time. You're not part of this family anymore. You're not part of this family anymore." The words hung in the air, sucking the oxygen from my lungs. I looked at my son's face, once so full of open admiration, now a mask of resentment. I saw my daughter, a confused puppet in her mother's play. The party continued around us, a vibrant, happy scene from which I was utterly excluded. The pain was a physical, crushing weight. I wanted to scream, to shake them, to beg them to remember all the bedtimes, the bike rides, the whispered secrets. But I saw Vanessa's triumphant gaze, and I knew that was what she wanted. She wanted me to break. She wanted a scene. So, I did the hardest thing I've ever done. I swallowed the agony. I let a calm, gentle smile touch my lips. I reached out and softly ruffled Jake's hair, a gesture he once loved. He flinched away as if burned. "That's okay," I said, my voice miraculously steady. "I understand. It's your day, Sophie. I hope you have a wonderful party." I turned and walked back to my car, my back straight, my head held high. I didn't look back. But with every step, the icy calm inside me hardened into a diamond core of resolve. The silent war was over. The real battle was about to begin. The betrayal wasn't just Vanessa's infidelity that ended our marriage, that was a single wound. This was a slow, calculated poisoning. It was death by 1,000 cuts. After the birthday party, the alienation became overt. My scheduled calls went unanswered. When I did get through, the conversations were stilted, filled with long silences and rehearsed hostility. "Mom says we don't have to talk to you if we don't want to," Sophie would parrot. My weekends with them, court-ordered and sacred to me, became exercises in misery. They'd sit in stony silence in the car. They'd reject the meals I cooked, the movies I picked, the activities I planned. Mom says your cooking made her sick. Mom says that movie is inappropriate. The final, undeniable proof came from Jake's iPad. He'd forgotten it at my house after a particularly tense weekend. A notification popped up, a message from Vanessa. Don't forget what we talked about. Your father is unstable. He's trying to buy your love because he's empty inside. If he tries to badmouth me, just remember everything I've told you. He's the reason our family broke. Be strong for your sister. My hands shook as I read it. It was all there. The programming. The manipulation. The villainization. She wasn't just turning them against me, she was building a narrative where she was the victim and I was the monstrous cause of all their pain. Her accomplices were my own children, weaponized against me. She had exploited their trust, their malleable minds, and the natural confusion of a divorce to create her own personal army. The betrayal had been happening for years, in whispered conversations after bedtime, in subtle comments during car rides, in a relentless campaign to rewrite our shared history. I was a software engineer by trade. My intelligence was in patterns, code, and data. I was a problem solver. And this was the most critical problem of my life. I stopped trying to reason with the kids. I stopped pleading. Every emotional reaction from me was just more ammunition for Vanessa. Instead, I became an archivist of the alienation. I started documenting everything. Every rejected phone call, logged with date and time. Every hostile exchange during pickups and drop-offs, recorded in a detailed journal. I saved every text message, every email. I began legally recording our phone conversations, in a one-party consent state, capturing Vanessa's subtle digs and the children's coached responses. But I needed more. I needed a professional. I went through 3 lawyers before I found Eleanor Shaw. She was in her 60s, with steely gray hair and eyes that had seen every trick in the book. I showed her my documentation. Parental alienation, she said, the term landing with the weight of a gavel. It's a form of psychological child abuse. It's also notoriously difficult to prove in court. They'll say the children are just expressing their own preferences. How do we prove it? I asked, my voice desperate. We need a pattern. We need a smoking gun. And we need an expert, she said. We need a child psychologist who specializes in this. At her direction, I doubled down. I was the perfect, predictable, unflappable father. I showed up on time, every time. I provided a safe, stable, and loving home, even if it was met with silence. I never spoke ill of Vanessa. I was building a case, not just for a judge, but for my children's future selves. The stakes were my children. My relationship with them, their mental health, their very understanding of love and family. I wasn't just fighting for access, I was fighting for their souls. My symbolic gesture was a dedicated, encrypted hard drive. I called it the truth. It contained every piece of evidence, every recording, every journal entry. It was my arsenal. My envelope was ready. The moment came when Vanessa filed a motion to modify custody, seeking to reduce my time to supervised visitation only. Her affidavit was a masterpiece of fiction, painting me as emotionally manipulative, volatile, and a damaging influence on the children. My lawyer, Eleanor, didn't flinch. She filed our response, a simple, powerful document that stated, the father denies all allegations and asserts that the mother is engaged in a systematic campaign of parental alienation. We request an immediate custody evaluation by a court-appointed forensic psychologist, Dr. Rebecca Miles. We didn't present our evidence yet. We simply asked for the expert. It was a chess move. Vanessa, overconfident, agreed. She thought the psychologist would see difficult children and a disengaged father. She had no idea that I had already provided Dr. Miles with a copy of The Truth. The power shifted silently. The battlefield was no longer Vanessa's living room, it was a psychologist's office, a realm where manipulation could be diagnosed and dissected. The final confrontation wasn't in a hallway or a phone call. It was in a courtroom. Vanessa sat at her table, smug and composed, surrounded by her legal team. I sat with Eleanor, my hands clasped tightly on the table. The trial began. Vanessa's lawyer painted his picture. Then, we called our witness, Dr. Rebecca Miles. She took the stand, a calm, authoritative presence. She explained parental alienation to the judge in clear, clinical terms. She described the 8 classic behavioral manifestations, the campaign of denigration, weak and frivolous rationalizations for criticism, lack of ambivalence, the independent thinker phenomenon, reflexive support of the alienating parent, absence of guilt, borrowed scenarios, and the spread of animosity to the extended family. And then, Eleanor began her questions. Dr. Miles, in your evaluation, did you find evidence of these behaviors in the children? I did. All of them, Dr. Miles stated. She then detailed specific examples, each one corroborated by an entry from my journal or a recording from my hard drive. And in your professional opinion, who is the source of this alienation? The mother, Vanessa, Dr. Miles said unequivocally. The children's views are not their own. They are a mirror, reflecting a narrative they have been taught. The father has consistently demonstrated behaviors associated with the targeted, rejected parent. He is a victim of this process, as much as the children are. I watched Vanessa's face. The smugness melted into confusion, then panic. Anger. When it was her lawyer's turn for cross-examination, he was aggressive. Isn't it possible, Dr. Miles, that the children simply don't want a relationship with their father because of his own behavior? Manipulation. Vanessa took the stand. She cried. I would never. I just want to protect my babies. He's trying to take them from me. But her performance rang hollow against the mountain of data. Begging. During a recess, she cornered me in the hallway, her eyes wild. David, stop this. You're destroying our family. Think of the children. They'll be traumatized. I looked at her, the architect of all this pain. You traumatized them, Vanessa, I said, my voice cold and final. I'm just cleaning up the mess. Eleanor had been steps ahead. She had anticipated every one of their arguments and dismantled them with forensic precision. She didn't just present a case, she presented an undeniable diagnosis. The judge's ruling was a thunderclap of justice. He granted me primary physical custody. Vanessa's time was reduced and made contingent upon her completing a specific therapeutic program for alienating parents. He ordered family therapy for the children and me, and individual therapy for them to deconstruct the alienation. The fallout was brutal for Vanessa. Her own family, who had been fed lies for years, began to question her. The court's judgment was a public repudiation of her motherhood. The most emotional moment came weeks later, in the therapist's office with Jake. He was sullen and angry. The therapist gently asked him, Jake, can you tell me one specific thing your dad did that made you so sure he didn't love you? Jane struggled, then muttered, he just doesn't. Your mother said he didn't love you. But can you point to something he did? The silence stretched. And in that silence, a crack appeared in the fortress. He couldn't name one thing. Because there wasn't one. I finally explained to the therapist, and later to Jake, why I had been so quiet. I knew if I fought back the way I wanted to, with yelling, with anger, it would just prove everything she was saying about me. I had to be the calm in the storm. I had to fight for you in a way that wouldn't hurt you more. Even when every word from you felt like a knife. Vanessa's collapse was total. She was exposed, not just as a bitter ex, but as a psychologically abusive parent in the eyes of the law. She lost the one thing she had fought so dirty to keep, control. Her access to our children was now monitored and conditional. Her narrative was shattered. The persona of the perfect, victimized mother was gone, replaced by the court's label, an alienator. The community that had once sided with her now saw the truth. She was left isolated, a victim of her own toxic campaign. The healing was slow. It took months of therapy, of consistent, patient love. There were setbacks. But slowly, the real Jake and Sophie began to emerge from the shadows. The borrowed phrases faded. The reflexive contempt softened. One night, about a year later, Sophie came into my home office, holding the vintage astronaut helmet. "Dad," she said, her voice small. "Can we still look at the stars?" My breath caught in my throat. I just nodded, unable to speak. We went into the backyard, and we looked up at the infinite sky. She didn't say much, but she held my hand. The silence between us was no longer loud and painful. It was peaceful. It was a beginning. The poetic justice was perfect. Vanessa's own weapon, the children, was taken from her. The court system she tried to use to finish me off became the instrument of her own downfall. Her lies, once so powerful, were rendered powerless by the truth. Now, when I hear my children's laughter in my home, it's no longer an echo from a memory, it's the sound of a victory that was never about winning, but about saving. I learned that the highest court isn't made of wood and law books, it's the human heart. And while poison can cloud it for a time, it can never extinguish the fundamental truth of a parent's love. The hardest fights aren't fought with fists, but with patience, and sometimes, the most powerful revenge is simply to heal. Have you experienced parental alienation or know someone who has? What advice would you give? Share your stories of hope and resilience in the comments. And if you believe in fighting for your family, subscribe for more stories of unwavering love and justice.